In the last day was there was this really awkward moment between the Princess of Wales and Queen Camilla. Catherine was engaged in a conversation with Melania Trump, and Camilla was kind of standing there looking really awkward, not really making eye contact.
Beneath the grand facade of Camilla's mansion, a darkness lingered, hidden from the world, locked away for years. Everyone believed it was a place of forgotten memories. But what if it held something more? The faint smell of decay, the chilling whispers that echoed from its depths. Some secrets should never stay buried. And when the walls finally began to crumble, the truth shattered everything we thought we knew.
Phases as a child by loving this or that. But I think I have to admit in the end, I ended up probably being a sort of pony-mad child with Black Beauty, which I howled over night after night after night. And that was probably one of my favorites. And then you probably, because you're far too young.
What they discovered was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Camilla's mansion was known for its lavish design, standing proudly amidst sprawling grounds and impressive architecture. A grand estate that seemed to hold nothing but beauty and elegance on the surface, it quickly became a symbol of high society. However, beneath the surface, in the shadows of its magnificent walls, lay a world that few would have imagined. The basement of the mansion, secluded and tucked away, became the home to secrets so dark that they remained hidden for decades. Those who had the misfortune of encountering these secrets would find themselves entangled in a web of mystery and intrigue that, over time, would reveal a far different side to the mansion's illustrious reputation. The mansion itself had an air of mystery from the moment it was built. Its sprawling grounds and impeccable design suggested wealth and grandeur, but there was always something about it that felt just a little off. Many who visited spoke of its eerie, unsettling quiet, despite the lively events that took place within its walls. This atmosphere was only heightened by the mansion's architecture, especially the design of the basement. The basement was not like others, often ignored or used for storage. It was intentionally hidden, difficult to access, and shrouded in secrecy. Over time, whispers spread among the mansion's staff and visitors that something more than just ordinary items might lie hidden there. When Camilla first moved into the mansion, it was a symbol of status. She was known for her connection to high society, and the mansion was a reflection of that status. It was a place where lavish parties were held, where the elite gathered to enjoy luxury in all its forms. But beneath the shine and glamour, there were growing rumors. As with any place of such wealth and power, those on the inside often heard things that never made their way to the public. Staff members began to notice strange occurrences and felt a growing unease when they were tasked with entering the basement. The most troubling part was that they couldn't quite explain why they felt this way. Some described the basement as more of a maze than a straightforward space. It seemed to have endless corridors, hidden rooms, and secret doors that weren't easily found. The basement, once merely a place to store household items, seemed to have taken on a far more sinister role in the years that followed. But when Camilla was asked about it, she would brush off any questions with an air of nonchalance, assuring visitors and staff that it was just a regular basement, perhaps even a bit more grand than most. However, as time went on, people started to wonder whether there was more to the basement than Camilla would admit. The basement was often described as a cold, isolated place. Unlike the rest of the mansion, which was warm and inviting, the basement felt barren, as though it existed to be hidden away from view. Few people were ever allowed to enter it, and the few who did were often left feeling uncomfortable and anxious. They couldn't explain exactly what it was about the basement that unsettled them. It was more a feeling than anything tangible. Some staff members reported hearing strange noises emanating from the depths of the mansion late at night. Sounds that seemed to come from the basement but could never quite be traced. These unsettling noises led many to speculate about what really went on down there, though no one dared to investigate further. For years, the basement's purpose remained a mystery, even as Camilla's life unfolded in the public eye. She continued to host events and maintain the image of a glamorous, untouchable figure. The mansion became more famous for its parties and gatherings, where the rich and powerful would mingle in an atmosphere of opulence and indulgence. Yet, in the background, behind the carefully curated facade, the basement remained a place of whispers and unspoken stories. It was only when one former employee of the mansion came forward that the true nature of the basement began to surface. This individual, who had worked at the mansion for several years, had been among the few who had access to the basement and had witnessed strange and unsettling things firsthand. They spoke of hidden rooms that contained objects and items that didn't seem to belong to a regular household. There were mysterious pieces of furniture, elaborate decorations that seemed out of place, and objects that seemed to serve no purpose other than to confuse and disorient anyone who stumbled upon them. As more former employees began to speak out, it became clear that the basement held far more than just oddities. Some claimed that there were items that hinted at something darker, things that suggested the basement was used for far more than storage. There were reports of hidden cameras that were placed in the basement, some of which were discreetly tucked away in corners and behind mirrors. The idea that Camilla, or someone else in her inner circle, might have been using these cameras to spy on those who visited the mansion became a chilling possibility. But for years, these rumors remained just that, rumors. When a few brave souls managed to gain access to these hidden rooms, what they discovered shocked them to their core. The basement was not simply a storage space or a place for forgotten items. Instead, it was a dark, secretive place where activities far from the eyes of the public took place. Those who ventured too far into the basement found themselves stumbling upon disturbing objects and evidence that suggested not all was well in Camilla's mansion. Some people spoke of finding evidence of hidden meetings, mysterious transactions, and even items that suggested some form of control over others. But even as the first whispers of the basement's darker secrets began to emerge, those closest to Camilla continued to protect her image. She had built her reputation on being a woman of elegance and grace, and no one wanted to shatter that image, not publicly, at least. Those who had come into contact with the basement's secrets were often silenced, their voices lost in the din of those who continued to defend the mansion's pristine reputation. It wasn't until the mansion changed hands and new owners moved in that the true extent of the basement's secrets began to emerge. As the new owners began renovations and dug into the history of the estate, they uncovered the remnants of what had been hidden for so long. The basement, once a place of mystery, became a symbol of the darkness that had lingered in the mansion for decades. What had once seemed like just a quiet, unused space was now a testament to the hidden truths of Camilla's life and the empire she had built. The discovery of these secrets was not only a revelation for the new owners, but also for the world at large. What had been hidden for so long could no longer stay buried, and the truth about what had taken place in the mansion's basement began to unfold in a way no one had expected. As more details emerged, the public was forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the mansion and the woman who had once lived there. The basement of Camilla's mansion was not merely a secluded storage area or a forgotten part of the grand estate. It was, in fact, a place of increasing mystery and unease. From the moment Camilla had moved into the mansion, the basement was a place that intrigued those who had even the slightest knowledge of the estate's layout. Despite the mansion's outward appearance of wealth, elegance, and grace, there were subtle signs that the basement was far more than it appeared. It was a place of secrets, dark, hidden, and troubling secrets that would only slowly begin to come to light. Initially, the basement seemed like nothing out of the ordinary. For many years, it served the typical functions of any grand mansion, storing spare furniture, seasonal decorations, and unused items from the more public rooms of the house. It was large, well-lit, and accessible to staff who needed to retrieve or store various items. For those who had to go down there, it was a routine task, nothing more than a quick trip into a utilitarian space. However, as time went on, there was an undeniable sense that the basement was hiding something more than just old furniture and forgotten trinkets. Rumors began to swirl about the strange nature of the basement, fueled by the whispered words of staff members and occasional guests who had ventured into the lower levels of the mansion. The basement seemed unnaturally cold for such a luxurious house. It was also disconcertingly quiet, an eerie silence that never seemed to lift, even during the bustling parties or gatherings that filled the upper levels of the mansion. Those who entered the basement spoke of an almost oppressive atmosphere, a sense that something was out of place, something was being hidden, but they could never quite put their finger on what it was. These whispers of something being amiss only intensified over the years, yet the true nature of the basement remained elusive. The mansion's grand design had several sections, and the basement itself seemed more complex than it should have been for such a space. The walls were lined with intricate woodwork, and there were rooms that seemed to serve no clear purpose. Staff who were tasked with maintaining the basement began to notice things that didn't add up. There were doors that led to unexpected areas, corridors that wound back on themselves, and rooms that, for reasons unknown, appeared to be locked or sealed off. There was a sense that the basement had a design of its own, one that wasn't simply functional, but rather carefully constructed with an air of secrecy. As the mansion hosted high-profile events and catered to the elite, there were always visitors who had no idea about the strange energy lurking beneath the surface. For many, the basement was nothing more than an inconvenience, an out-of-sight area where the hustle and bustle of the rest of the house couldn't reach. But for a few, those who had access to the more private corners of the estate, the basement began to represent something far more sinister. The first sign that something was deeply wrong came when a former employee of the mansion, who had spent several years working within its walls, decided to speak up. This individual, who had once been trusted with the care of the mansion, revealed their troubling experiences in the basement. It started as a trickle of information, but eventually became a flood of revelations. The basement, according to the former employee, wasn't just a place for storage or housekeeping. It was a place of secrets, a place where unsettling activities took place out of sight from the world above. The former employee described the basement as a labyrinthine structure, its various rooms interconnected by narrow corridors, and some of the rooms concealed behind false walls or hidden doors. What was most disturbing, however, was the discovery of objects that did not belong in any home, let alone a mansion of Camilla's prestige. There were items that felt out of place, objects that hinted at activities that went far beyond what anyone could have imagined. It was as though the basement had been transformed over the years into a private world, one built for reasons that were far from innocent. In one of the rooms, the former employee uncovered what appeared to be a series of old, strange-looking documents, detailing events and actions that didn't make sense within the otherwise lavish lifestyle that Camilla led. These documents were written in cryptic language, and although their meaning was unclear, they gave the impression of a hidden agenda, a plan that had been quietly unfolding in the mansion for years. It was clear that these were not the types of papers that a person would want anyone to find, and they were quickly hidden away again, tucked into a drawer that no one would think to search. Another room contained an array of old photographs, some of them deeply disturbing in nature. The photographs showed people in various compromising positions, though it was unclear whether they had been taken in the mansion itself or elsewhere. Some of the images were faded, their subjects long forgotten, while others were clear enough to evoke uncomfortable questions. As unsettling as the photographs were, they seemed to serve a singular purpose: to catalog certain events, perhaps to keep track of them, or to ensure they could be used later for leverage or control. This was the moment when the basement's true nature began to emerge. It was no longer just a storage area. It had become a repository of secrets, a place where things were hidden that no one outside of the mansion's inner circle was meant to see. Yet, it wasn't just the objects that painted the basement in such a dark light. Staff members who had been given permission to enter these areas, though only sporadically, spoke of hearing strange noises emanating from deep within the walls. There were whispers, faint and ghostly, as though conversations were being held just out of reach. And sometimes, when the staff would enter certain rooms, they would find the lights flickering, as if there were some invisible force causing the strange disturbance. It was as though the very basement itself was alive, filled with the weight of its secrets, and unwilling to let anyone uncover its truth. As the years went by, fewer people were allowed to access the basement. Those who had once worked there or lived in the mansion were either no longer around or had been silenced in one way or another. The atmosphere surrounding the basement became more tense, and the mansion's public persona, the image of Camilla as a gracious and elegant host, seemed to fracture. Those who had once praised the mansion for its grandeur now whispered about its more sinister qualities. The stories about the basement's contents and activities spread beyond the walls of the estate, and soon, the mansion became associated with more than just wealth and social standing. It became a symbol of secrecy and the hidden lives of those who had controlled it. Despite these mounting suspicions, the mansion continued to host events, and Camilla maintained her position in society. She never acknowledged the rumors surrounding the basement. In fact, whenever asked about it, she would offer only vague, polite answers, as if it were a non-issue. The public, perhaps unwilling to believe anything negative about such an iconic figure, continued to idolize her, while the basement remained locked away, a place of dark secrets that few dared to uncover. But the questions remained. What was really hidden in the basement? Why did it seem so disconnected from the rest of the mansion? What had once been a mere curiosity gradually turned into something far more disturbing. Those who had once dismissed the basement as nothing more than an old, unused part of the house were now beginning to see it for what it really was: a hidden world where activities, dark and dangerous, had been carefully concealed from the prying eyes of the public. It wasn't until years later, when the mansion changed hands, that the full scope of the basement's secrets was finally revealed. What had once been locked away in the shadows was now exposed to the light, and the world was forced to confront the truth about what had transpired in that very space. What had begun as rumors and whispers grew into a full-blown investigation, one that uncovered far more than anyone could have expected. As the basement's dark history was unearthed, the mansion's role in a much larger and more troubling story became undeniably clear. The secrets hidden in the basement of Camilla's mansion had remained locked away for years, but as time went on, it became increasingly clear that the mansion's history was far darker than anyone had imagined. Once, the mansion had been a symbol of wealth and sophistication, a place where the social elite gathered, where glamorous parties were held, and where the most influential people in society rubbed shoulders. But beneath the surface of all this glittering luxury, the basement remained a symbol of something else entirely: a hidden world, dark and filled with secrets that would forever change the way the mansion and its owner were viewed. It wasn't until after the mansion changed ownership that the true scope of what had transpired in the basement began to emerge. By this point, much of the mansion had been altered, and the rooms that had once been kept secret were now open to exploration. The new owners, who were eager to learn about the mansion's history and restore its grandeur, began to uncover what had been hidden from the public eye for so long. As they explored the lower levels of the mansion, they quickly realized that there was far more beneath the surface than they had anticipated. One of the first clues to the mansion's hidden past came when the new owners discovered strange markings on the walls of the basement. At first, these markings appeared to be nothing more than random scratches or scuffs left behind by years of neglect. However, as they inspected the markings more closely, they realized that they followed a distinct pattern. Some of the marks seemed to form letters, while others were arranged in a way that suggested they might represent something far more significant than mere wear and tear. The owners had no idea what the markings meant, but the discovery was enough to raise their suspicions. It was as though someone had gone to great lengths to hide something, or perhaps to leave behind a trail for someone to follow. As the investigation into the basement continued, more troubling discoveries began to surface. Hidden behind false walls, the new owners found boxes of documents that appeared to have been meticulously stored, as though someone had taken great care to keep them hidden from view. The contents of the boxes were troubling, to say the least. Among the papers were records of various transactions, some of which were difficult to interpret, but many of them seemed to be connected to people who were never publicly associated with the mansion or its owner. The names on these records were not those of famous socialites or wealthy businessmen, but rather, they seemed to be individuals who had somehow become involved with the mansion in ways that were not immediately clear. The most disturbing document found in the basement, however, was a detailed ledger which appeared to catalog a series of events and actions that no one could have imagined. The ledger was filled with cryptic notes and references to people, places, and incidents that were completely unknown to the mansion's new owners. It was clear that these were not ordinary records. They seemed to represent a much deeper, darker side to the mansion's history, one that had been carefully kept out of the public eye for decades. As the owners pored over the ledger, it became increasingly clear that the mansion's basement had been used as a secretive space for activities that were not just private, but potentially illegal. Among the documents, there were also photos, some of which were so unsettling that the owners had to stop looking at them altogether. The photos depicted individuals in various states of distress, though the identities of the people in the images were not immediately clear. These were not the types of photographs one would expect to find in a place of wealth and power. They seemed to suggest a hidden world of exploitation, manipulation, and control, one that had been carefully concealed from everyone who had ever set foot in the mansion. The owners knew that these photos were just the tip of the iceberg, and the more they uncovered, the more the dark reality of the basement's purpose became apparent. It soon became clear that the basement was more than just a place where secrets were stored. It had been a place where secrets were made. The mansion's previous owner, Camilla, had long been known for her impeccable taste and her carefully curated image as a woman of grace and refinement. To the outside world, she was a socialite who threw extravagant parties, a woman who lived in the lap of luxury, and whose name was synonymous with the height of sophistication. But the truth that began to emerge from the basement suggested a much different story, one that was filled with manipulation, coercion, and a network of individuals who had been exploited for purposes that no one could have ever predicted. The more the new owners dug into the mansion's past, the more they began to understand the extent of the control Camilla had wielded over those who had entered her world. It was as if the mansion itself had become a prison for those who had been lured into its orbit, with the basement serving as a key component in that system of control. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that the mansion had been a carefully constructed facade, hiding a much darker, more twisted reality beneath the surface. As the investigation deepened, former staff members who had worked in the mansion began to come forward, offering their accounts of what they had witnessed behind closed doors. Many of these individuals had remained silent for years, but now, with the basement's secrets being slowly revealed, they felt compelled to speak out. Their stories were chilling, painting a picture of a mansion that had been a place of fear, secrecy, and manipulation. One former staff member recalled the strange atmosphere that pervaded the mansion, a sense of unease that seemed to hang in the air at all times. This individual spoke of the basement as though it were a separate world altogether, a place that was both physically and emotionally removed from the rest of the mansion. There, in the shadows, Camilla had orchestrated a series of events that no one could have imagined. The stories that emerged from former employees painted a picture of a woman who had used her wealth and power to control those around her, manipulating them in ways that were both subtle and extreme. It was as though the basement had served as the perfect environment for Camilla to maintain her grip on those who had entered her life. From hidden surveillance systems to secret rooms designed for unspeakable acts, the basement had been a place where power and control were exercised without mercy. As the truth came to light, it became clear that Camilla's mansion was not just a place of wealth and glamour. It was a place where lives had been broken, where secrets had been kept, and where a system of manipulation had been allowed to flourish for far too long. The basement, once seen as just a storage area, had become a symbol of the dark underbelly of the mansion, a place where the true nature of those who had controlled it was laid bare. The mansion, once a symbol of success and grandeur, had become a testament to the dangers of power and the lengths to which some would go to maintain control. In the years that followed, the mansion was abandoned, its dark secrets exposed for all to see. It was no longer a place of elegance and luxury, but a haunting reminder of what had taken place within its walls. The basement, once a hidden and mysterious space, had become a symbol of the twisted nature of power and the lengths to which people would go to conceal their true intentions. What had once been a symbol of wealth and success had, in the end, become a place of shame and regret. The mansion would never be the same again, and neither would the legacy of those who had called it home. As investigators, former employees, and even some of the mansion's previous guests began to piece together what had taken place, it became apparent that the basement had not only been a place for the storage of secrets, but it had been a hub for orchestrating those very secrets. What had been carefully crafted over decades was slowly revealed to be a complex web of power dynamics, where individuals were controlled, manipulated, and exploited to serve the whims of those at the top. And at the center of it all was Camilla, whose image as a glamorous socialite hid the true nature of her actions. The basement of the mansion was no longer just a physical space. It became a metaphor for the darker side of power, the hidden realm where decisions were made in the shadows and where the powerful went to great lengths to keep their secrets safe. It was here, in the concealed recesses of the mansion, that the truth about Camilla's life and the lives of those she had touched began to emerge. And the more that was uncovered, the more disturbing the picture became. Former guests who had attended parties at the mansion over the years began to come forward, sharing their experiences and shedding light on what had taken place behind the scenes. Many of these individuals had remained silent for years, either out of fear or a sense of complicity. But now, with the basement's secrets slowly being exposed, they felt compelled to speak out. Their stories were chilling, detailing how the mansion had been a place where control was wielded over guests and employees alike. Some spoke of the elaborate schemes that had been orchestrated to lure people into the mansion, promising them a life of luxury and excitement, only to trap them in a world of manipulation and coercion. The basement itself had served as the epicenter of these operations, a place where guests were often filmed without their knowledge, their every move monitored and recorded for the purpose of maintaining control over them. Hidden cameras had been strategically placed throughout the basement, and some of the footage that had been discovered was enough to shock even the most hardened investigators. It became clear that Camilla had used these recordings as a means of exerting power over those who had entered her world. The footage was not only used to control her guests, but also served as a way to create a network of compromise, a system in which people's secrets were kept, and in some cases, used as leverage to ensure their compliance with Camilla's desires. But the basement wasn't just a place of surveillance and manipulation. It was also a place where darker activities took place. Former employees began to speak out about what they had witnessed during their time working at the mansion. Many described the atmosphere as one of fear and uncertainty, where staff were kept in line by threats and the promise of rewards for their loyalty. Some employees spoke of the strange rituals that took place in the basement, where Camilla and her inner circle would gather in secret, plotting their next moves and ensuring that their control over the mansion and its occupants remained absolute. These gatherings, often held behind locked doors, were said to be where the most powerful decisions were made, decisions that would have a lasting impact on the lives of those involved. One former staff member described the basement as a place where the mansion's darkest secrets were stored. Not only were there hidden cameras, but there were also files, documents, and personal items that had been carefully cataloged and stored away. The staff member recalled how Camilla would often visit the basement alone, going through the files with a sense of urgency and determination, as though she was constantly searching for new ways to maintain her control. There were whispers of a secret ledger, a record of all the people who had been brought to the mansion, the deals that had been made, and the favors that had been traded. This ledger was said to contain the names of individuals who had become indebted to Camilla in some way, people who had either done her bidding or had been coerced into doing so. As more and more people came forward with their stories, it became clear that the basement had served as a storage facility for not only secrets, but also for things that were far more disturbing. Some of the objects that were found in the basement were items that had been used to manipulate and control the people who had entered the mansion. There were records of people who had been offered vast sums of money in exchange for compromising their morals or their values. Some individuals were lured to the mansion under the guise of business opportunities, only to find themselves trapped in a world of blackmail, exploitation, and abuse. The more the investigators uncovered, the clearer it became that the mansion's basement was not just a physical space, but a symbol of the toxic power dynamics that had ruled the mansion for so long. It represented a place where those in control could operate without fear of being exposed, a place where people's lives were manipulated and distorted for the benefit of those at the top. And as the basement's secrets were revealed, it became increasingly apparent that the mansion itself had been built on a foundation of lies, deception, and exploitation. What had once been a glamorous world of parties, luxury, and privilege now seemed to be a carefully constructed facade designed to hide the true nature of what had been happening behind closed doors. The mansion's reputation, once untarnished, was now irrevocably damaged. The world that had been created within its walls was exposed as a place where manipulation and control were the driving forces, and where the desires of the few came at the expense of the many. The revelations surrounding the basement of Camilla's mansion did not stop with the stories of exploitation and control. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Camilla's influence extended far beyond the walls of the mansion itself. It was revealed that she had connections to powerful individuals in politics, entertainment, and business, and that her ability to control those around her had allowed her to maintain her grip on power for years. The basement, it seemed, had been a place where deals were made, alliances were forged, and secrets were kept, not just for the benefit of Camilla, but for the benefit of those who had helped her maintain her empire. In the years that followed, the mansion was abandoned, its once grand halls now standing empty and decaying. The basement, once a hidden world of manipulation and control, was left behind, its secrets exposed for all to see. The mansion had become a symbol of everything that was wrong with the system that had allowed it to thrive. But even as the mansion's walls crumbled and its legacy was tarnished, the truth about what had happened inside those walls lived on, a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the lengths to which some would go to maintain it. The story of Camilla's mansion and the basement that had concealed its darkest secrets is a cautionary tale, a reminder that no matter how glamorous or sophisticated the world may appear on the surface, there are always hidden forces at play, manipulating the lives of those who are caught in their web. It serves as a reminder that the most powerful people are often the ones who are able to operate in the shadows, behind closed doors, and that the true cost of their power is often measured in the lives of those who are left in their wake.